My friends, we gather tonight not merely to listen, but to awaken, to let the words themselves stir the archetypal depths that have long slept within the corridors of our being. When the mirror breaks, something ancient within us stirs. It is not only the reflection that shatters, it is the illusion that the image was ever whole. We stand before this mirror not as vain seekers of beauty, but as those who tremble before revelation. For the empath, the delicate soul, attuned to the vibrations of another's unseen pain. The mirror has always been both sanctuary and snare. In the early stages of love, the empath believes he perceives truth through feeling. He believes his compassion is light, a bridge to the other soul, but hidden beneath this compassion often lies an unconscious collusion, a secret participation in control. The empath imagines he loves purely, yet his love becomes a subtle form of dominance, for in sensing the other's wounds, he begins to shape, to heal, to redeem. The moment he becomes a redeemer, he has ceased to love freely. He has entered the labyrinth of power, disguised as care, and thus the mirror cracks, for it can no longer sustain the image of love without control. This moment of awakening, when the empath sees that his tenderness has been a mask for possession, is one of the most profound initiations of the psyche. It is as if one were to look upon the face of the beloved and suddenly see not her eyes or smile, but the shadow of one's own mother or father lingering behind. We do not fall in love with a person. We fall in love with the unresolved image of our own soul. Every act of devotion is a dialogue between our inner figures. The other merely provides the screen upon which the archetype projects its sacred drama. In alchemical terms, this moment is the nigredo, the blackening. The empath descends into confusion, shame, and despair. He says to himself, I only wish to love. How then have I become the controller? But this descent is necessary. It is a baptism of the unconscious. Only through the dissolution of our idealized image of love can the true eros be reborn. The empath must die to his fantasy of saving others if he is ever to encounter love as a mutual fire rather than a sacrifice. When I speak of control, I do not mean only the overt forms, the domination of will, the manipulation of word or gesture. The deeper control is psychic. It is the secret expectation that the other fulfill an inner image we have carried since childhood. The empath, more than most, is ensnared by this expectation, for his sensitivity allows him to anticipate and adjust to the other's moods with exquisite precision. But what he calls understanding is often the psyche's clever method of securing love by ensuring dependency. The empath may unconsciously create a world where the other cannot stand without him, and he mistakes this bondage for connection. Imagine a dream in which you are in a vast hall of mirrors. Each mirror reflects you differently, one young and radiant, another aged and hollow-eyed, another bearing the face of a stranger. As you move closer, you realize that each mirror responds to your gaze when you smile, they smile. When you frown, they darken. And then one mirror shatters. And in that breaking you see not an image but a void. A darkness that seems to breathe. That void is a self unimaged, unreflected, unknowable by ordinary sight. The empath's task is to endure this void without fleeing into another illusion of saving or being saved. This breaking of the mirror is terrifying because it exposes the fundamental solitude of the soul. Love, in its divine essence, is a bridge across that solitude, but not its erasure. The empath longs to dissolve separation, to feel merged with a beloved, but the psyche demands differentiation. Individuation requires that love become a dialogue between two centers of consciousness, not a fusion that annihilates both. Thus, when the empath sees the truth about love and control, he begins to understand that to love truly is to let the other be. He must relinquish his role as healer and accept the wound as sacred. Many of you have felt this paradox in your own lives. You loved someone so deeply that you could not bear their pain, and so you took it upon yourself to heal them. Yet, in doing so, you became the custodian of their weakness. You prevented their growth in order to preserve the illusion of your indispensability. This is the unconscious tyranny of the empath, the hidden shadow beneath compassion. It is a paradox that can only be resolved through consciousness, through the courage to see that our noblest intentions may conceal our most primitive fears. When I speak of love, I speak not of sentiment, but of energy, eros, as the eternal creative principle that binds opposites. Love seeks wholeness, not comfort. It demands the confrontation of shadow. To love is to stand before the abyss of the other's being and not flinch. The empath's tragedy is that he feels the abyss but cannot bear its depth. He hurries to fill it with light, with understanding, with care, but the abyss does not need to be filled. It needs to be seen. Only when the empath can stand in the presence of the beloved's darkness without rescuing them does love become an act of liberation rather than control. At this point, the empath undergoes a psychic inversion. The energy that once flowed outward toward others begins to turn inward. He feels an unfamiliar emptiness, a withdrawal of meaning from the outer world. This is the alchemical solution, the dissolution of identity. The mirror is gone. He no longer knows who he is without the reflection of the other's need. The ego trembles, for it has lost its sense of purpose. But beneath this disorientation lies a sacred opportunity to discover the self not through the eyes of another, but through direct communion with the inner archetypes. In such moments, dreams often arise as messengers from the unconscious. One patient of mine, a woman whose life had been devoted to nurturing others, dreamt that she carried a bowl of milk through a desert. As she walked, the milk began to evaporate, leaving only dust. Desperate, she knelt and wept over the empty bowl. Then she saw that the dust shimmered, forming the outline of a child made of light. The child reached out and touched her heart, and she awoke in tears. The dream revealed to her that her compassion had been poured out into a barren world, but the loss of that nourishment gave birth to a new inner child, a symbol of renewed individuality. The empath must lose the milk of his outward giving to find the golden child within. When the mirror breaks, the psyche no longer seeks validation through reflection. Instead, it begins to perceive through the eye of the self. This inner sight does not judge or compare. It simply beholds. In this state, love ceases to be a transaction of giving and receiving. It becomes a radiance, a field of energy that flows from the union of conscious and unconscious within the individual. The empath, once enslaved by the emotions of others, becomes a vessel for something greater than personal feeling, a universal compassion that asks for nothing in return. Yet the journey to this realization is fraught with peril. The empath's greatest temptation is regression, the desire to reassemble the broken mirror, to return to the familiar reflection of being needed. He may seek another relationship to repeat the old pattern, hoping this time to save without controlling. But until he accepts his own inner wound, the original source of his need to heal others, he will remain trapped in the cycle of projection. To break this cycle, he must descend into the underworld of his own psyche, to encounter the archetype of the wounded healer. The wounded healer is an ancient figure, known to the Greeks as Chiron, the centaur who could heal others, but not himself. In this myth we see the empath's plight, the ability to perceive the pain of the world, yet an incapacity to address one's own suffering. The healing begins when the empath ceases to flee from his wound and turns toward it as a sacred teacher. The wound is the portal through which the self enters consciousness. Without it, there would be no humility, no depth, no wisdom. The empath's gift lies not in escaping pain, but in transmuting it into awareness. At this juncture, many feel the pull of despair. They say, if love cannot save, what is its purpose? To this I answer, love does not save, it reveals. It unveils the hidden patterns that govern our lives, the unseen gods that move our hearts. Through love, we encounter our destiny, démon, that inner necessity that shapes our path. The empath's awakening, painful as it is, signifies the beginning of true individuation. He no longer lives as an echo of others' emotions. He becomes a participant in the grand alchemy of the soul. When the mirror breaks, what remains is a clear air of presence. The empath learns to see without absorbing, to feel without drowning, to love without binding. He discovers that the greatest act of compassion is to allow others to suffer their own destiny. Only then does love become a sacred dance between freedom and connection, between the human and the divine. When the mirror lies shattered at our feet, a silence falls within the soul, a silence that is not emptiness but expectancy. It is the pause between death and rebirth, the sacred suspension before the new image forms from the fragments of the old, the empath, standing amidst these shards, feels the disorientation of one who has lost both compass and reflection. What once seemed a world of clarity, the capacity to feel, to understand, to soothe, now reveals itself as a labyrinth of unconscious motives. And yet, this very confusion is the threshold of transformation. The psyche demands disillusionment before revelation. For truth, in its purest form, is intolerable to the ego that has lived by illusion. In my own explorations of the unconscious, I have often witnessed how the moment of psychic crisis opens the door to the archetypal, the empath, stripped of the power to heal others, encounters for the first time the deeper forces that govern his compassion. He meets the ancient figure I have called the wounded healer, whose pain is not a flaw, but a symbol of participation in the mystery of wholeness. Every wound is a gateway to the self. When we cease to flee from it, it ceases to bind us. The empath's wound is his initiation, his personal suffering that mirrors the collective suffering of humanity. Consider for a moment the myth of Chiron, half man, half horse. He embodies the dual nature of the human psyche, the civilized and the instinctual, the conscious and the unconscious, wounded by an arrow dipped in poison. He could never heal himself. Though his wisdom brought healing to countless others, his immortality became his torment. For he could not die, nor could he be restored. Only when he surrendered his immortality, when he accepted death, was he released. So it is with the empath. Only by surrendering the fantasy of perfect healing, by allowing the wound to exist as part of his being, can he achieve true wholeness. Healing is not the removal of pain, but the reconciliation with it. The empath's awakening is therefore a crucifixion of identity. The ego that once drew purpose from the suffering of others now finds itself suspended, emptied, and powerless. But in this crucifixion lies a secret resurrection. As the energy of projection withdraws from the outer world, it begins to circulate within. What was once poured into relationships now becomes the fire of inner alchemy. The soul, long neglected in favor of others, demands attention. The empath begins to dream, not of rescue, but of symbols, snakes shedding their skin, rivers reversing their flow, birds emerging from flames. These images are the language of transformation, the psyche's announcement that new life stirs beneath the ashes. In one of my patients, a man who had spent his life sacrificing himself for a woman addicted to sorrow, this transformation began with a recurring dream. He found himself walking through a great cathedral filled with mirrors, each one reflecting a different scene from his past moments of tenderness, of betrayal, of endless giving. At the far end stood a single unbroken mirror. He approached it and saw not his own face, but the image of a lion, calm and radiant. The lion spoke, saying, "Do not mend the mirrors. Walk out of the hall." He awoke in tears. That dream marked the turning point of his life, for he began to sense that love need not be penitence, that strength and compassion could coexist without servitude. The lion is the symbol of solar consciousness, of the integrated self that no longer defines itself through others but radiates its own light. This inner lion, this solar principle, is born only when the lunar aspect of empathy, the reflective, receptive, self-sacrificing mode, undergoes death. The moon must darken for the sun to rise. The empath must accept that love is not the endless mirroring of another's needs, but the affirmation of being. Only when he ceases to be the moon for others can he discover the sun within himself. In this sense, the breaking of the mirror is not tragedy, but initiation. It marks the transition from lunar to solar consciousness, from emotional fusion to spiritual individuation. But let us not mistake individuation for isolation. To individuate is not to withdraw from love, but to love with awareness. The empath who has awakened does not cease to feel. Rather, it feels more deeply, but without attachment to outcome. He learns to witness suffering without becoming its prisoner. He can sit beside another's despair and not lose himself in it. This is compassion without control, the purest form of eros, which unites yet frees. Still, this freedom is not easily won. The old patterns of psychic bondage return like ghosts. The empath may find himself drawn once more to those who wound, for the unconscious seeks repetition until understanding is achieved. The psyche is circular, not linear. It moves in spirals, revisiting the same themes from deeper levels each time. The empath may dream again of broken mirrors, of faces merging and dissolving, of voices calling for help. Each dream is a test. Will he rush to repair, to soothe, to merge, or will he hold his center, letting the image unfold without interference? The mastery of the empathic soul lies in endurance, to endure the tension between love and autonomy, between connection and freedom, without collapsing into one or the other, is to stand at the center of the mandala of the self. In alchemy, this stage is called conjunctio oppositorum, the union of opposites. It is the sacred marriage of eros and logos, of feeling and consciousness. The empath, having integrated his shadow of control, now experiences love not as a compulsion, but as a creative act. He becomes both vessel and flame, capable of intimacy without enslavement. In this new state, love reveals its deeper mystery. It is no longer the meeting of two incomplete beings seeking wholeness in each other. It is the dance of two wholes, recognizing their shared origin in the one. The empath who has reached this stage perceives that every relationship is symbolic, a reflection of the eternal relationship between consciousness and the unconscious. The beloved is not merely a person, but an archetype, the anima or animus, through which the soul dialogues with the divine. To love consciously is therefore to engage in sacred play, knowing that each joy and each wound serves the unfolding of the self, let me share with you an image that has haunted mystics for centuries. The mirror that reflects not the face but the soul. In the Eastern traditions, this mirror is polished through meditation until it reflects the Absolute. In the Western alchemical tradition, the mirror is shattered, and through the cracks the light of the self shines forth. Both paths lead to the same revelation, that the reflection and the reality are one. The empath's path is that of the shattered mirror, for his initiation comes through suffering, not serenity, but in the end, he too discovers that love and control, when seen through the lens of consciousness, are but polarities of a single energy, the will to unite. To see this truth is to enter the realm of paradox, where opposites coexist without conflict. The empath realizes that control was never entirely evil, nor love entirely good. Both were expressions of the psyche's longing for order in chaos. Control was the ego's attempt to preserve love. Love was the soul's attempt to transcend control. Only when both impulses are integrated does the self emerge as a silent witness beyond them. In this awareness, the empath becomes truly free, not detached. Buceane, like a deep river that carries all reflections, yet remains undisturbed. I have often said that modern man's neurosis arises from his loss of myth. The empath's suffering is a microcosm of this collective wound. In a world that worships reason and neglects soul, sensitivity becomes pathology, and love becomes transaction. The empath's over-identification with others is an unconscious protest against this collective dissociation. He feels too much because the world feels too little. But his healing does not lie in numbing his sensitivity, it lies in sanctifying it. When his empathy is grounded in self-awareness, it becomes not a burden but a vocation, a bridge between the personal and the archetypal. He becomes, in a sense, a modern mystic, a bearer of feeling in an age of abstraction. But this mysticism is not sentimental. It is disciplined by consciousness. The awakened empath walks among men as one who sees the invisible currents moving through their words and actions. He no longer intervenes to change them, for he knows that each is following the necessity of their own psychic pattern. He becomes a silent participant in the world's unfolding, compassionate yet detached, like the hermit who carries a lantern into the dark woods, not to banish the night, but to witness it. And yet, even this serenity is not the end. The psyche is never static. The empath will continue to encounter mirrors, each revealing deeper truths. For every integration opens new depths. Every illumination casts new shadows. The journey of consciousness is infinite, spiraling ever closer to the center that is everywhere and nowhere. To walk this path is to accept perpetual transformation, to die and be reborn countless times in the fires of relationship and reflection. Love, in its highest form, is not possession nor surrender, it is revelation. It reveals the God within the human and the human within the God, it shows us that we are both mirror and light, both healer and wounded, both lover and beloved. When the empath sees this truth, the mirror no longer needs to break, for he understands that it was never the mirror that bound him, but the gaze that sought itself within it. The mirror breaks only once. Afterward, the soul sees through. The empath, now transformed, walks among reflections without losing himself. His compassion has become wisdom, his tenderness, strength. He knows that to love is to participate in the divine play of opposites, to hold both pain and joy as expressions of one eternal energy. And so he lives not as rescuer nor victim, but as witness to the unfolding of the mystery of love that neither controls nor is controlled, but simply is. When the empath awakens from the dream of saving others, he begins to perceive life through a different aperture, as though the eye of his soul has dilated and now beholds dimensions invisible to the ordinary gaze. The world no longer appears as a stage of separate beings locked in dramas of affection and control. It becomes a living mandala of interwoven patterns, every gesture a symbol, every encounter an echo of the eternal dialogue between consciousness and the unconscious. What once seemed merely personal reveals its archetypal root. The empath begins to see through people not in judgment, but in recognition of the mythic figures animating their lives and his own. He perceives the lover not only as a person to be cherished or feared, but as the anima, the inner feminine who invites the soul toward wholeness. He perceives the rival not as an enemy, but as the shadow, carrying the unlived strength or anger he has disowned. He perceives the suffering of others not as his burden, but as a mirror of the collective wound of the human race. In this expansion of vision, love ceases to be sentimental. It becomes sacred, impersonal, almost priestly. The empath's heart, once fragile and porous, becomes the vessel of an ancient fire. Yet this higher perception is not attained by fleeing the human. The divine does not abolish the personal, it transfigures it. The empath must still walk among men, still encounter misunderstanding, still feel the ache of separation. But now these experiences are no longer traps, they are initiations. Each pain is a message from the self, each joy a glimpse of eternity. Love continues to wound him, but each wound now becomes a doorway, each loss a teacher. In this way, the empath moves from the role of participant to that of conscious co-creator in the alchemy of existence. It is often said that enlightenment is a solitary achievement, but the empath discovers that solitude is itself relational. To be truly alone is to stand in communion with the totality of being. It is a solitude filled with presence. When he no longer clings to others for identity, he begins to feel the subtle pulsation of life itself moving through him. He senses that love is not an emotion but a field, a vast continuum connecting all hearts. Within this field, even suffering acquires dignity. for it too belongs to the great pattern. In this state of expanded awareness, the empath begins to encounter what I have called the archetypes of transformation. These are not mere ideas, but living energies, divine figures that shape the evolution of consciousness. The first among them is the shadow, which he has already met in his struggle with control. The second is the anima or animus, the inner counterpart that mediates between ego and self. The third, and perhaps the most profound, is the wise old man or woman, the archetype of inner guidance, appearing in dreams as a sage, a hermit, a luminous child, or a silent presence whose eyes contain the depth of stars. When the empath begins to follow this inner guide, life itself takes on the character of initiation. The outer events mirror inner progress. Coincidences and symbols weave into a pattern of meaning. What psychology calls synchronicity emerges the causal connecting principle that unites inner and outer worlds. The empath, once enslaved by emotional cause and effect, now experiences a mysterious harmony, as though unseen hands arrange circumstances for the soul's education. This is the beginning of the mystical stage of consciousness, where psyche and cosmos are felt as one continuum. At times, this awareness can be overwhelming. The empath may feel he is dissolving, for the boundaries between self and world grow porous once more, but this time not from unconscious fusion, but from expansion into the universal. He perceives that his personal history was never merely his own. It was the vessel chosen by the self for incarnation. His wounds, his longings, his relationships, all were threads woven by a larger intelligence. In this revelation, humility blossoms. He no longer asks, "Why did this happen to me?" but "What is life revealing through me?" This shift marks the entry into the archetype of the seer. The empath who once absorbed others' pain now perceives the patterns behind it. He becomes a witness to the play of the opposites, no longer trapped in their struggle. In a dream, he may see himself as an eagle flying above stormy seas, his wings steady though the waves rage below. That eagle is the symbol of transcendent vision, the capacity to observe without being swept away. To see in this way is not to detach coldly, but to hold all opposites within the heart's vast compassion. Yet the human heart resists such vastness. The ego trembles before infinity. There are nights when the empath feels bereft, for the personal passions that once gave color to his existence now seem dim. This is the desert of the spirit, the necessary interval when the soul adjusts to the new light. The mystics knew this phase well. They called it the dark night. The empath must pass through it without despair, for in that darkness the divine seed germinates. It is the stillness before dawn, when all old desires die, so that love may be reborn without object. One evening, in that silent state, the empath may suddenly feel a warmth in his chest, a wordless presence, as if the universe itself were breathing through him. He realizes that love is not something to be given or received, It is the substance of existence itself. He, the beloved, and the act of loving are one movement. This is the mystical union toward which all the stages of breaking and awakening have pointed. It cannot be forced, for it is grace, but it arises naturally when control and illusion have dissolved. The alchemist spoke of this final stage as the rubedo, the reddening, when the white light of spirit and the black matter of the unconscious merge into a single living gold. In psychological terms, it is the state of wholeness. When the opposites have been reconciled in consciousness, the empath, now integrated, becomes an embodiment of this gold. His empathy is no longer reactive but creative. It does not drain him but replenishes. He becomes a source of light precisely because he no longer seeks to shine. His mere presence heals not by intervention, but by resonance. Others feel in him a quiet authenticity, a peace that requires no explanation. To reach the state, one must surrender all images of what love or self should be. Every concept, every belief becomes an idol blocking the living truth. The self is not a static ideal, but a dynamic totality, forever unfolding. The empath must learn to live without clinging to form, to let relationships, identities, even insights rise and fall like waves. He must trust the ocean, for the ocean is the unconscious mate, conscious the eternal flow of being in which all opposites dance. When the mirror broke, he thought he had lost everything. Now he sees that the mirror was never meant to preserve his image, but to reveal the boundless behind it. He sees that control and surrender, love and detachment, self and other, are but masks worn by the same mystery, and the mystery itself cannot be named. It can only be lived. In the later stages of his transformation, the empath begins to serve, not through action, but through presence. He becomes what the ancient texts call a psychopomp, a guide of souls, not by doctrine, but by being. His understanding flows naturally. His words heal because they are born from silence. He no longer fears suffering. He recognizes it as the raw material of consciousness. To those still trapped in the mirrors, he offers not solutions, but awareness. Look, he says, not at the reflection, but through it. Such a one walks in both worlds, the visible and the invisible. He lives among people, yet his roots are in eternity. He participates in the world's laughter and grief, yet his heart rests in an unchanging center. He has become what the mystics called the transparent man, one through whom the divine light passes unhindered. His empathy is no longer sentiment but vision. He sees the soul behind the mask, the archetype behind the event, the eternity behind each fleeting moment. To live in this way is not to escape humanity, but to redeem it. For when even one person becomes conscious of the unity behind all opposites, that consciousness radiates invisibly through the collective psyche. The empath who has seen the truth about love and control becomes a carrier of that truth for the world. He is no longer the wounded one. but a healer who heals by being whole. And yet, even in this state, the journey does not end. The self is infinite. Each realization opens a deeper mystery. The empath, now seer, must continually surrender, for even enlightenment can become a mirror. If clung to, he must allow the light to break again and again, until no fragments remain, only the transparency through which the divine sees itself. This is the eternal task of consciousness, to polish the mirror of existence until it reflects not image, but light itself. So the empath becomes the mirror, and in that final transformation, there is no longer empath or other, lover or beloved, seer or seen. There is only awareness, luminous, compassionate, free. The mirror no longer breaks, for it has become invisible. And so, my friends, we arrive at the quiet culmination of the long journey, the place beyond the mirror, where reflection gives way to direct vision, where the empath stands naked before the mystery that once terrified and enchanted him alike. The mirror has shattered, but something more enduring has taken its place, the stillness of the self, the luminous awareness that watches all phenomena without judgment, without need, without fear. The stillness is not detachment, it is participation without possession. It is love stripped of every illusion of control, every echo of dependency, every whisper of fear. It is the knowing that to see truly is to love, and to love truly is to see. When I speak now, I do not speak merely of psychology, but of the eternal movement of the soul. For psychology, when carried to its deepest root, becomes indistinguishable from mysticism. It is not a science of behavior, but a revelation of being. The empath's awakening is thus not a therapeutic success, but a spiritual birth. He has passed through the crucible of relationship and emerged as one who knows that every bond was an image of his own inner union. Every conflict, an encounter between his own light and shadow. Every act of love, a gesture from the self to itself. The transformation that follows this realization cannot be described by ordinary words. It unfolds as a subtle reorientation of perception, a reversal of the entire psychic current. The energy that once flowed outward in endless attempts to fix, to soothe, to redeem, now flows inward and upward, returning to its source. The empath no longer seeks to transform others. He becomes transformation itself. His presence radiates equilibrium. Even his silence communicates. When he enters a room, the atmosphere shifts slightly, as though an invisible tuning fork has been struck, harmonizing all discordant vibrations. This is not charisma. It is resonance with the deeper field of being. If he speaks now, his words are few, but they carry the tone of authenticity, that rarest of sounds in a world of noise. He no longer interprets others' pain as a call to action, but as a manifestation of the universal process of becoming. He listens, not to respond, but to witness, for witnessing is the highest form of empathy. the capacity to hold the other's experience in consciousness without interference, allowing it to unfold toward its own truth. In this way, the empath becomes a midwife of souls, assisting not through advice or correction, but through presence. You may ask, is this not the end of love? Has love been transcended into abstraction? I tell you, no. It is the beginning of love in its purest form. When love is freed from possession, it becomes the very breath of the cosmos. The empath's heart no longer beats for this person or that. It beats with the rhythm of existence itself. He loves not because he chooses to, but because love has become his nature. In him, eros and agape, desire and grace, merge into one current. He gives without depletion because he no longer gives from the ego, but from the inexhaustible source. This is the meaning of the old mystical saying, the lover and the beloved are one. It is not a romantic union, but a metaphysical one. In every being he meets, the empath sees the face of the same mystery that once looked back at him through the broken mirror. Even pain now becomes sacred, for he knows it as the shadow side of creation's fire. Joy and sorrow alternate like day and night, yet he remains the sky in which both unfold. The ego, which once sought control, now bows before the vast intelligence of life. It is at this stage that the archetype of the self reveals its full splendor. The self is not an idea. It is the living totality of what we are. The union of conscious and unconscious, human and divine, temporal and eternal. The empath who has reached this awareness has become a vessel of that totality. His personal history, with all its sorrows and triumphs, becomes transparent, like a stained glass window through which light passes, coloring but not obstructing. He knows that even his mistakes were necessary, each one a stone in the path toward wholeness. In such a state, life itself becomes symbolic. Every encounter, every coincidence, every fragment of daily existence glows with meaning. The world, once chaotic and threatening, reveals itself as a living organism of purpose and intelligence. The empath no longer struggles to create harmony. He perceives that harmony is already the underlying condition of reality. His task is simply to align with it, to let the inner and outer worlds resonate as one instrument. Let us imagine, then, that we are seated once more in that hall of mirrors, but this time the atmosphere has changed. There are no more sharp edges, no more reflections that deceive. The empath stands in the center, holding a single shard of glass in his hand. He looks into it and sees not a face, but light, pure, formless, infinite. The shard glows, and the walls dissolve. Around him there is only space, luminous and alive. This vision is not fantasy. It is a psyche's image of enlightenment. The moment when the individual recognizes himself as part of the cosmic totality. Yet I must warn you, the journey does not end in perfection. There is no final arrival. Even the most awakened soul continues to participate in the rhythm of expansion and contraction, of descent and ascent. The empath, now awakened, will still feel pain, will still make errors, will still grieve, but he will no longer be imprisoned by these experiences. He will suffer consciously, love consciously, live consciously. His awareness will hold all contradictions in the vessel of acceptance. He has learned the supreme secret of the psyche, that wholeness is not the absence of conflict, but the harmony that arises when all opposites are embraced. The empath's compassion, once reactive, has now become creative. He no longer mirrors pain, he transforms it. In his presence, others may glimpse their own hidden light, for his consciousness acts as a catalyst, but he does not claim this as his power. He knows that he is merely a conduit for the self, which works through him as it works through all beings. His humility is profound, for he sees clearly that nothing personal remains. The personality has become transparent, a servant of the eternal, and yet there is joy, an indescribable joy, quiet but radiant. It is the joy of being, the joy of knowing that one's existence contributes to the unfolding of the cosmos. The empath feels himself as a note in the divine symphony, unique yet inseparable from the whole. He no longer seeks purpose, for he has become purpose. Every breath, every heartbeat, every moment of awareness is a participation in the mystery of creation. In this realization, love and control are reconciled. Control, at its deepest essence, was always the ego's distorted attempt to imitate the order of the self. Love, at its highest essence, is that very order experienced as beauty. When the empath sees this, he no longer rejects control, but integrates it. He acts with precision when needed, with surrender when called. His will and the will of the universe have become indistinguishable. This is the alchemical gold, the unity of opposites transmuted into consciousness. Sometimes he dreams again of mirrors, but now they are whole. Their surfaces liquid, like water. When he gazes into them, he sees faces of strangers, animals, trees, stars, all shimmering as aspects of the same self. He understands that love was never meant to bind two beings together. It was meant to remind all beings of their shared origin. Every act of true empathy is a momentary remembrance of that unity. The empath, once tormented by the urge to save, now blesses silently, for he knows that salvation was never a task but a revelation. And so the lecture nears its close, though in truth there is no end to this conversation between soul and soul. The mirror broke to free the light within it. The empath suffered so that compassion might become wisdom. Love exposed control so that consciousness could emerge from illusion. This is the pattern of all evolution, the descent into shadow, the shattering of form, the birth of awareness, each of us, whether empath or skeptic, lover or recluse, walks this same path in our own way, for the soul's hunger is universal. The longing to know itself through the experience of life. If you remember nothing else from these words, remember this: the mirror was never your enemy. It broke because it could no longer contain the immensity of who you are. The shards that cut you were fragments of your own brilliance, urging you to release the image and behold the light itself. Every heartbreak, every disillusionment, every surrender has served this one purpose: to awaken you to the self that is beyond all mirrors. And in that awakening, control transforms into grace, empathy into vision, and love into being. You do not need to fix what is broken, for nothing essential was ever broken. You need only to see, to feel, to live as the awareness that embraces all things. Then, the world itself becomes the mirror, not to reflect your image, but to reflect your soul's eternal dance with the divine. So the mirror breaks, and the empath sees that love was never lost, only misunderstood. He sees that control was only the fear of separation, now dissolved in unity. He sees that he is both the mirror and the light, both the question and the answer. And in that moment of seeing, silence descends, not the silence of absence, but the silence of completion. The lecture ends here, yet it truly begins anew in each of you who listens with the heart. For the words are nothing, the seeing is all. May you go forth as living mirrors of consciousness, reflecting not illusion, but truth, not control, but compassion, not attachment, but love. And may the light that once shattered your world now illumine it from within. For when the mirror breaks, my friends, the soul is finally free to behold its own infinite face.